The last delivery address, house number 13, Blackwood Road. It was a cold, moonless night. Adnan, a young pizza delivery boy, tightened his jacket as he rode his bike through the silent streets of the city. His shift was about to end when a last-minute order popped up on his app. A single pepperoni pizza. The address seemed unfamiliar. House number 13, Blackwood Road. Adnan hesitated. He had heard rumors about Blackwood Road. Stories of people disappearing, strange sightings, and houses that seemed to breathe. But orders were orders, and he couldn't afford to lose his job. As he approached the road, the city lights dimmed, replaced by thick fog that seemed to wrap around him like a predator waiting to strike. Blackwood Road was eerily silent, with ancient trees looming like dark sentinels. Adnan's GPS led him to a dilapidated mansion at the very end of the street. The house looked abandoned, its windows shattered and the door slightly ajar. Yet, the order had been placed from here. Nervously, Adnan walked to the front porch, the pizza box in one hand and his phone in the other. He knocked on the door. No response. He knocked again, harder this time. The door creaked open on its own. "Hello? Pizza delivery?" he called out, his voice echoing into the empty hall. From inside, a faint voice replied, "Come in." Adnan's instincts screamed at him to turn around and leave, but curiosity and duty pulled him inside. The air was icy, and the smell of damp wood filled his nostrils. The hallway was lined with old portraits, their eyes seeming to follow him as he walked. A sudden crash made him jump. He spun around to see the door he had just entered slowly closing, as though an invisible hand were pushing it shut. Panic began to creep in, but he took a deep breath and pressed on. The GPS app on his phone displayed the message, "You have arrived at your destination. Is someone there?" he called again. This time he heard faint whispering, too soft to make out. He followed the sound, each step echoing ominously in the empty house. The shadows on the walls seemed to ripple, as though alive. He entered the living room. A single chair faced a fireplace that had long since gone cold. In the chair sat an old man with hollow eyes and a face pale as death. He wore tattered clothes, and his bony fingers clutched an old photo frame. "Your pizza," Adnan said, his voice barely above a whisper. The old man didn't move. Instead, he slowly raised his head and said, "Thank you for coming, Adnan. I've been waiting for you." Adnan's heart raced. "How do you know my name?" The old man's smile widened unnaturally, revealing yellowed teeth. "This house, it calls those who are meant to stay. And now, you're part of it." The lights flickered violently, and the room seemed to shudder. Adnan stepped back, nearly dropping the pizza box. The old man's figure began to distort, his body stretching and twisting as though made of smoke. His voice deepened, echoing with a guttural resonance. "You can't leave, Adnan. No one does." Adnan turned to run, but the door he had entered was now gone, replaced by a solid wall. The portraits on the walls began to shift, their painted faces contorting into screams of agony. A low, rumbling sound filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. He stumbled back into the hall, desperate to find another exit. The walls began to close in, the hallway narrowing unnaturally. From the corner of his eye, he saw figures, shadows that moved without form, their whispers now a cacophony of sinister laughter. A cold hand grazed his shoulder, and he spun around to see nothing but darkness. "Let me go!" he shouted, his voice breaking. Suddenly he tripped and fell onto the floor. The pizza box slid across the room, stopping at the feet of a dark silhouette. This figure wasn't the old man, but something far more terrifying. Its glowing red eyes pierced through the darkness, and its mouth opened in a silent scream, revealing rows of jagged teeth. Adnan scrambled backward, but the floor beneath him seemed to dissolve. He was falling now, plunging into an abyss of blackness. The whispers grew louder, transforming into shrieks of torment. He reached out, clawing at the air, but there was nothing to grab onto. Then, as suddenly as it began, everything went silent. Adnan awoke to find himself back in the living room, the pizza box intact beside him. The old man was gone, and the house was eerily still. Shaking, he stood up and bolted for the front door, which was now wide open. Without looking back, he ran to his bike and sped away. When he reached the pizza shop, his manager frowned. "What took you so long?" she asked. "The customer called and said you never delivered the pizza." Adnan's blood ran cold. "What customer?" The manager looked at the receipt and said, "House number 13, Blackwood Road." Adnan stammered, "That's impossible." "I was just there." The manager's expression darkened. "Adnan, Blackwood Road. That street was demolished years ago. There's nothing there but rubble." Adnan felt his legs give way as the realization hit him. The pizza box in his hands fell to the floor, but when it opened, it was empty, except for a single note. "See you soon.